Measure twice, trust once. That was my rule, until the day I realized a man who married my daughter had been measuring me for a coffin-sized box labeled Old Fool. My name's Matthias, but in Oklahoma City most folks just call me Matt. 69 years old, retired builder. Palms still nicked from decades of framing houses under sun that turns a man's shadow brittle. My wife's been gone a while. I keep her church-lace handkerchief folded in my wallet like a blueprint for breathing. My daughter, Talia, is the last good beam in this old frame. And 2 days after her wedding, the new husband showed me he was wrought under fresh paint. His name is Sterling, like the silverware he likes to wave around, though he never once at a table. Talia believed him. That's the part that stung like a bent nail under the thumbnail. I wanted to believe him, too. But the bubble in my guts level never lies. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. If you've lived long enough, you learn a house tells you when it's settling wrong. A hairline crack above the door, a window that sticks on humid mornings. People do the same. With Sterling, it was the way he shook my hand, palms soft, grip rehearsed, while his eyes scanned the room like a contractor counting outlets. He laughed a half-second too late at my jokes, wore boots that never touched mud, and said sir like a sales tax. Talia met him at a fundraiser, fell for the tux and the rescue dog stories. He's kind, Dad, she told me, her voice all hope in Sunday afternoon. He listens. He listened the way a shop vac does, only to make space for himself. At the reception, he toasted me like a Boy Scout reading a plaque at the state fair. I raised my plastic flute and smiled anyway. A father learns when not to pick a fight. Weddings and funerals, mostly. I cover the honeymoon. 10 grand on my card, because that's what a dad does when he's got more years and plans and a daughter with bright eyes and a new last name. I said it was a gift. Truth? It was an investment in her happiness. I just didn't know who held the deed. That night, after the limo taillights disappeared down the cul-de-sac, I sat on the porch swing with my old yellow Stanley tape in my palm, thumbing the metal edge. The tape's face was dinged from 1,000 corners, but the numbers stayed true. I listened to the wind chimes Mrs. Ellison hung next door, notes drifting like porch gossip. Somewhere in that music, I heard my wife say, "Careful, Matt. Love's a load-bearing wall until someone carves a door through it." I'm not a hero. I'm a foreman of what's left. A man who knows how to brace a sagging beam, who believes in square corners and square dealings. But I'm also not a victim. A week before the wedding, call it an old man superstition, I made a quiet phone call that felt like driving a test nail into a stud. If the timber rings solid, you keep building. If it thuds, you tear it out. I didn't tell Talia. A dad shields where he can. A warrior picks ground and weather. 2 mornings later, trash day, blue barrels yawning on the curb. My doorbell chimed the tune my wife programmed years ago. Take me out to the ball game. I smoothed that handkerchief in my wallet, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. Sterling stood there in a city-slick suit that hadn't met a wrinkle, smiled bright as a dentist's light. But it wasn't the grin that froze me. It was a woman at his shoulder, leather case in one hand, steel stamp in the other, the kind of neutral face you see at the DMV and in bad dreams. He said, "Morning, sir. We've got a few signatures to handle." Behind him, the neighborhood mower coughed a life, and a freight train blew somewhere east on the tracks, long and low like a verdict. I let the tape measure slide out with a snap, the sound sharp as a gavel. Sterling's smile widened. The notary adjusted her glasses, and I felt the house, the one I built with my hands, go silent around us. "Matt," he said, savor my name like he owned the deed to it. "Let's talk about your house." And that's when the notary stepped onto my porch, raised the stamp, and Sterling told me he'd already sold it 2 days after the wedding. "You're out, old man. Papers are signed, money's moved, and a retirement home's waiting with your name on the door." That's what Sterling said, standing bold on my porch like a man who thought thunder answered to him. His notary, sharp as a scalpel, slid a folder across my patio table as if this place was already hers to catalog. I looked down and saw my own name printed under words like transfer of deed and vacancy order. The house I'd built nail by nail, brick by brick, the porch swing where my wife's laughter once echoed. It was all scribbled away in black ink. But man, my age doesn't flinch at shadows on paper. I'd spent too many winters tightening pipes so they wouldn't burst. Too many summers sanding beams until they shone. Paper burns. What endures? I leaned back in my chair, set my tape measure on the table with a heavy clack, and stared at Sterling the way a ranch dog stares down a coyote nosing the chicken coop. Calm. Still, deadly sure of what comes next. You're making this harder than it has to be, he pressed, smirk hanging on his lips like a billboard sign. You'll have a room with bingo nights and pudding cups. Safer for you. Cleaner. Talia agrees it's for the best. Hearing my daughter's name pass his mouth like that, it was a nail-driven crooked. I remembered the $10,000 wired for their honeymoon cruise, the quiet years of covering her rent when jobs ran thin, the groceries slipped into her pantry when she wasn't looking. Sterling had turned my love into leverage. I folded the notary's folder shut with one hand, slow as closing a coffin lid. My other hand rested on my wife's handkerchief in my pocket. I said, before we swing by this so-called home, there's a stop we need to make. Sterling frowned, the confidence slipping just a hair. And where's that? The Oklahoma City Police Department. I told him, my voice steady as poured concrete. They've been expecting us. The mower down the block went silent. A dog barked once, then quieted like even the neighborhood knew a storm had split open. The notary's pen froze above the page. Sterling's grin cracked. His eyes darted, searching for the punchline. What the hell are you talking about? He spat, the silk of his voice fraying. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, my eyes steady on his. A week before you married my daughter, I hired a private investigator. He's been busy enough that the police have a file thick as a 2x4 with your name stapled all over it. The porch creaked under our weight. Sterling's bravado flickered, like a neon sign about to die. I let the silence hold, long enough for him to hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Then I added, low and sharp, you wanted me in a home. Instead, you're walking into a cell. The notary cleared her throat, her fingers twitching toward the folder. Sterling shot her a glare, but she kept her eyes down. He straightened, adjusted his tie like he could strangle back the fear creeping up his throat, and whispered, you're bluffing. I smiled, slow and grim. Then by all means, son, call it. That's when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He flinched, pulled it free, glanced at the screen, and the color drained from his face. Because the name glowing there wasn't Talia's. It was Detective Harris. And Sterling's hand shook so bad, he dropped the phone onto my porch. The phone hit the porch with a hollow clatter. Screen still glowing. Detective Harris. Incoming call. Sterling's polished shoes shuffled back half an inch, like he just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid. The notary's eyes darted from him to me, then to the folder, like she wanted to fold herself into it and vanish. Pick it up, I said, my voice flat as a carpenter's level. He didn't move. For the first time, his grin, the weapon he'd polished sharper than any knife, was gone. His lips pressed in, jaw twitching. I'd seen that look on men before. Not builders, not family men, but hustlers who'd cut corners until the house collapsed. You think you won something here, he hissed. This is just paperwork. Nothing sticks. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms like I was taking inventory. Paperwork. I nodded at the phone, buzzing again. That's more than paperwork. That's a warrant warming up. For a moment, silence. Then I let my memory drag me back, because revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from remembering. I remember when Talia was 12, braces shining in the sun as she played softball. She swung too hard and cracked the bat. She cried, thought the world was ending. I told her, sweetheart, bats break. What matters is a swing. And I bought her another. She believed me then. She trusted that her old man could fix anything, even splintered wood. So when she called last spring, whispering that Rem was behind and she didn't want to worry me, I slipped an envelope under her doormat. She never asked where it came from. That's what love is, patching the roof before the rain. And now the smooth-talking grifter had taken that trust, my trust, and tried to flip it like a foreclosure. I reached across the table and snapped open my tape measure. The metal tongue shot out, slapping against Sterling's folder with a snap. So loud, even the notary jumped. "You hear that?" I asked him, eyes steady. "That's the sound of something measured right. And you, son, you don't measure up." Sterling lunged for his phone, but I was quicker. My hand, old, scarred, but steady, landed on it first. I pressed the green button, put on speaker. "Mr. Sterling?" Detective Harris's voice rang out, calm but edged with iron. "We'd like you to come down to the station." "You know why?" Sterling's face drained pale. This is harassment," he stammered. "I'm with my father-in-law. He can vouch." But I cut him off, my eyes never leaving his. "Detective, he's right here. And he brought a notary to sell a house that doesn't belong to him." There was a pause on the line, then the detective's voice. "Good. Stay put. We're on our way." The phone clicked. Sterling's hands balled into fists, his polished facade cracking like cheap drywall under a hammer. "You're making a mistake. Old man. You don't know who you're dealing with." I stood, tape measure dangling like a badge, and looked him square in the eye. "Correction. You don't know who you're dealing with. You conned the wrong man's daughter." The notary gathered her folder in silence, her face tight, her pen useless. Sterling stepped back, searching for a shadow to crawl into, but the morning sun left him nowhere to hide. And as the sirens wailed faint in the distance, growing louder with every heartbeat, I saw the first crack in his armor. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was the cornered animal. And I was done building walls. I was tearing them down. The sirens grew louder, bouncing off the houses on my street, until the whole neighborhood seemed to hum with judgment. Sterling shifted from one polished shoe to the other, like a man standing on railroad tracks and hearing the train before he sees it. The notary clutched her briefcase against her chest as if it were a shield, but even she knew she'd signed on to the wrong job today. "Matt, listen." Sterling's voice cracked, his salesman charm fraying at the edges. "We can work this out. You're a reasonable guy. You don't want your daughter caught in a mess, do you? Think about Talia." Her name in his mouth again, like a cheap prop he thought could still get him sympathy, lit a fuse in me. "Don't you dare," I said, my tone low, controlled, the way you talk when you've had enough and there's no walking it back. Blue lights washed across the siding of my house, reflecting in the porch windows. The sound of car doors slamming followed. Sterling's eyes darted around like a trapped raccoon, calculating exits. He glanced at the back gate at the alley, but I leaned forward just enough so he knew he wasn't getting past me. 2 officers stepped onto the lawn, boots crunching against the gravel. One of them was Detective Harris himself, a barrel-chested man with the kind of patience you only see in people who spent decades waiting for liars to slip. His badge caught the morning light. "Sterling, right?" Harris said, his voice cutting clean to the chill air. "You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and pending charges still rolling in." Sterling raised his hands halfway, still trying to smile, but the grin was hollow. "This is a mistake. I'm a family man. Just married. Ask him." He jabbed a finger toward me. "Tell them, Matt. Tell them you don't want this." I took my time, drawing a breath that tasted like sawdust and freedom. "I told you. I said evenly, you married into the wrong family. This house stands because I built it straight. And when a rotten beam shows itself, I don't paint it. I rip it out." The officers closed in, snapping cuffs on his wrists. Sterling twisted, shouting, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." His voice cracked as the cold steel bit his skin. And right there, in front of the neighbors peeking through curtains and the notary shrinking into the background, I watched the mask fall off him completely. His slick suit couldn't cover the fear. His words didn't carry weight anymore. He was exposed, publicly, painfully. The notary muttered, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." She backed off the porch, nearly tripping down the steps, clutching her briefcase like a lifeline. Detective Harris glanced at me as they led Sterling away. "You did the right thing. Could have saved a lot of folks' trouble sooner." I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. Because saving people hadn't been enough this time. Not Talia, not me. Sterling had already dug his claws too deep. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, Sterling locked eyes with me through the glass. His lips curled around words I couldn't hear, but I knew what they were. I'll take her from you anyway. The car pulled away, lights strobing red and blue down my street. Sirens wailing like the echo of judgment. And standing there on the porch, tape measure still in my hand, I realized this was only the beginning, because snakes don't die easy. And Sterling wasn't done striking. The cruiser's taillights faded down the block, but the venom Sterling left behind still burned in my chest. His last look through that glass. It wasn't surrender. It was a promise. And I'd lived long enough to know that a cornered con man doesn't vanish quietly. He claws, he schemes, he finds new ways to sink his teeth. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the house creaking around me like an old friend groaning in its sleep. The tape measure lay on the table, next to my wife's handkerchief. I kept unfolding and refolding that square fabric, feeling the worn lace edges. It steadied me, but it also reminded me I wasn't just fighting for bricks and lumber. I was fighting for Talia's trust, for the memory of her mother, for every sacrifice I'd made that Sterling tried to twist into leverage. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. My gut told me before my eyes did. Him. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail. His voice slithered through the speaker, still cocky despite the cuffs hours earlier. You think a few handcuffs in me? I've got friends. Oh, man. Deal stacked higher than your roof beams. Talia will see you for the bitter relic you are. She'll come to me. She already chose me. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles whitened. The worst part wasn't his words. It was the doubt they planted. My daughter had looked at him with that wide, hopeful gaze. What if she still believed him? What if the arrest only made me look like the meddling father who couldn't let go? I thought back to the detective's file, the aliases, the phantom businesses, the trail of elderly couples left bankrupt and broken. Sterling had played this game before. He knew how to spin stories, how to turn victims against themselves. That's when I decided silence wouldn't save me. Action would. I called Detective Harris. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with fatigue. Matt, it's late. I know, I said, but I need everything. Every scrap you got on Sterling. If I'm going to protect my daughter, I need to understand how this man operates. All of it. A pause. Then Harris sighed. You're not a cop, Matt. No, I said, I'm a builder, and when I see rot spreading, I don't wait for permits. I cut it out before it takes the whole frame. The line went quiet for a beat. Then he said, come by the station tomorrow. I'll show you the file. I hung up, exhaling slow. For the first time in days, I felt a plan settling in my bones. I stepped out onto the porch. The February night bit cold at my skin, sky wide and star-punched above Oklahoma City. I lit the porch light, watched the beam spill over the walkway, and imagined Sterling's shadow crawling somewhere out there, planning his next move. Come at me? I whispered into the dark. I'll be ready. And just then across the street, I saw it. A dark sedan idling, engine purring low. Headlights off, watching. I tightened my grip on the tape measure in my pocket. The hunt had already started. The sedan didn't move, just idled there, a black tooth on the quiet street. My neighborhood was a kind where folks still wave from their driveways, where porch lights meant welcome, not warning. That car didn't belong. I stayed in the shadows of my porch, heart steady but fist tight. At 69, you learn to read silence like blueprints. And that silence told me whoever sat behind, that Will wasn't there by accident. Minutes stretched. Finally, the engine revved and the car rolled off slow, taillights vanishing at the corner. It wasn't relief I felt. It was confirmation. Sterling's reach went further than a pair of handcuffs. The next morning, I drove to the precinct. Harris met me in a back office stacked with files, the air stale with coffee and ink. He slid a thick folder across the desk, his eyes heavy. Careful what you ask for, Matt. I opened it. Page after page. Sterling's face under different names. Driver's licenses from 3 states, marriage certificates. Even a church photo where he played smiling groom beside some woman I'd never seen. Victim statements filled the rest. Retirees con out of savings. Widows who sign over property. Men my age left hollowed out. I flipped through until my stomach clenched. How the hell's a man like this keep walking free? Harris shrugged, weary. Smart enough to vanish. Dumb enough to think he won't get caught. You tripped him up because you saw early. Most folks don't until it's too late. I tapped a page where Sterling, under a false name, had married a woman barely older than Talia. He's a repeat offender. Why is my daughter still blind to it? Harris leaned back. Because love is the best con. It makes people deaf to truth, blind to red flags. That's his weapon. I closed the folder, the weight of it pressing like cinder blocks on my chest. Then I'll strip that weapon from him. In front of her. Leaving the station, I felt the sun on my face, sharp against the winter air. My boots scuffed the pavement as I crossed to my truck. That's when I noticed it. Same sedan parked half a block down. Different spot. Same shadow. I didn't flinch. Instead, I raised my phone and snapped a photo, making damn sure to flash one off. The car peeled away fast. Back home, I spread the file on my kitchen table. Photos, notes, addresses. I thought of Talia, her laughter as a girl, her tears when she scraped her knees, the way she hugged her mother's dress after the funeral. And now, she was wrapped in Sterling's lies, tight as barbed wire. My wife's handkerchief sat beside the stack, edges worn thin. I brushed my thumb over the lace and whispered, I won't lose her too. Then I heard it, the slam of a car door outside. I peeked through the blinds. Talia stood in my driveway, eyes red, face streaked with tears. And behind her, at the curb, another car door opened. Sterling stepped out, free and smiling. Talia's voice cracked through the cold air before I could even open the door. Dad, what did you do? Her words hit me harder than a hammer swing gone wild. She stood there in the driveway, arms crossed over her chest, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Behind her, Sterling leaned against the car like he was posing for a magazine spread, suit pressed, smirk plastered on. The handcuffs hadn't left a mark on his wrists or on his arrogance. I stepped out onto the porch, keeping my tone steady. What I did, I said, was save you from a man who's been playing husband to half the Midwest under different names. Talia shook her head, tears catching the morning light. He told me you'd try this, that you'd never accept him, that you'd make up stories. Sterling chuckled, low and smooth. See, sweetheart, your old man's stuck in his ways. He's jealous, bitter. He can't handle that you've moved on, that you chose me. My jaw tightened, but I didn't look at him. I looked at her. You think I'd lie to you, Talia? After everything? I've been the one holding you up since your mama passed. I paid for your honeymoon, your rent, your groceries. That wasn't weakness. That was love. And love doesn't lie. Her lip trembled. She wanted to believe me. I saw it flicker in her eyes. But Sterling was quick. He slid up beside her, laying a hand on her shoulder. Baby, he said softly, he's trying to control you. Look at this place. Old boards, faded paint. He's clinging to the past. Don't let him drag you into it. That was his trick. Painting poison as protection. I pulled the file Harris had given me from under my arm, the edges rough from my grip. I held it out. You want truth? Read this. Every page is a piece of him you don't know. Sterling snatched the file before she could touch it, flipping it open just enough to see the photos, the records. His eyes flashed, anger, not fear. Then he laughed, tossing it onto the hood of his car. Fabrications. Cops'll write anything when they need a win. You really think a man like me leaves a trail this sloppy? He was rattled. I saw it in the twitch of his jaw. The way his laugh came too quick. That was my opening. Funny, I said, stepping off the porch. Because Harris didn't call it sloppy. He called it patterned. And patterns don't lie. They repeat. You repeat. Talia glanced at the folder, then at Sterling, then at me. Her hands fidgeted, her chest rising and falling too fast. She was caught between blood and charm, between a father's proof and a con man's smile. Sterling leaned in close to her ear, voice low but sharp enough I caught it. Remember what we talked about. He's not stable. He'll ruin everything. That broke me. To hear him rewrite me in front of my own daughter. That was a nail I couldn't leave crooked. I stepped forward, my voice rising. You don't get to decide who I am in her eyes. She knows. She remembers. And soon enough, the world will too. Sterling smirked, backing toward his car. We'll see who she believes when this goes public. Talia gasped, turning to him. What do you mean? But he only smiled wider, sliding into the driver's seat. As the engine roared to life, he rolled down the window, eyes locked on me. Consider this round one, old man. Then he tore down the street, leaving the folder scattered on the hood, pages flapping like wounded birds. And Talia, trembling in my driveway, whispered, Dad, I don't know what to believe anymore. The papers Sterling had scattered fluttered in the wind, sliding off the hood and skidding across the driveway. I bent down, gathering them one by one, my hands steady till my chest throbbed. Talia stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself like the cold had finally seeped into her bones. Read them, I said softly, stacking the pages back into a folder. Not for me, for you. Every lie he told someone else, every life he hollowed out. It's all here. She shook her head, voice breaking. It's too much, Dad. It doesn't feel real. He said you'd twist things, that you'd make me choose between you. I set the folder on the hood again, pressing it flat with my palm. I'm not making you choose. I'm giving you facts. He's the one making this a war. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't move. I wanted to hold her, to remind her that under all the wreckage she was still my little girl. But I knew that push could break her. That night, the phone rang again. Another unknown number. I let it play to voicemail. His voice was different this time, lower, sharpened. You think you got the upper hand, Matt? Tomorrow, everyone in this city will know you're not the saint you pretend to be. Let's see how long your daughter clings to you when the truth comes out. I saved the message, every syllable proof of his unraveling. But it wasn't enough. Men like Sterling don't just bluff. They stack the deck, plant the rumor, twist the story until the victim looks guilty. The next morning, I walked into my favorite diner, place I'd been eating for 20 years. The usual crowd was there, truckers, contractors, retirees. Except this time, conversations hushed when I stepped in. Eyes slid toward me, then away. Darla, the waitress who poured me 1,000 cups of coffee, hesitated before setting one down. Rough week, Matt, she asked carefully. I nodded. Why? She leaned close. Word is, Sterling says you've been stealing your daughter's money for years. Living off her. Folks are whispering. My jaw tightened. That's a story? She sighed. And he's telling it loud. Social media, too. Claims he tried to save Talia from you. The diner seemed to tilt under my feet. Sterling wasn't just attacking me at home. He was dragging my name through the mud in public. I pulled out my wallet, laid a bill on the counter, and walked out into the Oklahoma wind. He wanted to humiliate me, break me down so Talia would cling tighter to him. But humiliation's a two-way street. And if Sterling thought he could strip me of my name, he was about to learn I'd been building reputations longer than he'd been alive. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Harris's number, and hit call. Detective, I said when he answered, it's time this con artist got a stage big enough to bury him on. Because the next move wouldn't be quiet. It would be public. And it would hurt. Detective Harris met me outside the courthouse steps, his trench coat snapping in the February wind. He looked me over with a mix of pity and respect. You sure you want to do this, Matt? Once it's out there, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I squared my shoulders. He's already out there, dragging my name through the gutter. The only way to fight a liar is to drag the truth into daylight. Harris handed me a folder, thicker now, padded with statements, financial records, even a few photos pulled from traffic cams. This is the kind of thing that doesn't just rattle cages. It tears them down. I nodded, slipping the file under my arm. My hands were steady, but my gut churned, not because I doubted the evidence, but because I knew Sterling. A man like that, backed into a corner, doesn't just fold. He bites. By the time evening came, word had already spread. The local paper picked up the whispers, the diner chatter, the online smears Sterling had seeded. Oklahoma builder exploits daughter's finances. One headline blared on a cheap blog. His fingerprints were all over it. So I made my own move. I walked into the VFW hall on Friday night, where half the neighborhood gathered for bingo and beer. The place smelled of fried onions and nostalgia, flags draped on the walls, laughter echoing under yellowed ceiling tiles. These were my people, men and women who'd seen me build decks, patch roofs, help after storms. I stepped onto the stage near the bingo cage, cleared my throat, and laid the folder on the podium. Conversations hushed. Faces turned. Some of you have heard stories about me. I began, my voice carrying steady across the room, that I've taken from my own daughter, that I've lost my way. A murmur rippled, uneasy. Well, tonight I've got another story. Not about me. About the man who married my daughter. His name's Sterling, and what he's been doing in this town and others makes termites look polite. I opened the folder, held up copies of his fake IDs, his marriage records under false names, the testimonies from elderly couples swindled out of their homes. Gasps cut the air like nails on glass. This is who he is, I said, and this is who I refuse to let destroy my family. The crowd shifted, anger rising not against me, but against the man I'd exposed. Murmurs of that bastard and poor girl spread through the hall. Then, right on cue, the back door slammed open. Sterling walked in, dressed sharp, smile weaponized. "Well, isn't this touching?" he drawled, his voice dripping poison. The old man with his bedtime stories. The room stiffened. He strutted forward, eyes locking on mine. "Show them all the paper you want. They'll see what I built. You're just a bitter relic." But before he could say another word, Harris stepped out from the corner, badge raised, voice booming. "Actually, Sterling, what they'll see is a con man under investigation." Gasps again, louder this time. Sterling's smile faltered, just for a beat, but it was enough. I leaned into the mic, never breaking his gaze. Looks like round 2 just started. And this time, the house isn't yours to sell. The hall erupted, voices rising, people pointing, the whole crowd turning against him. Sterling's mask slipped, sweat gleaming under the lights. And for the first time, he didn't look like the man in control. He looked humiliated, publicly, and it was only the beginning. Sterling froze in the VFW hall, 100 eyes pinning him like nails through plywood. His grin twitched, desperate to hold its shape, but sweat had already beaded on his temple. He opened his mouth, some slick retort ready, but the crowd's murmurs drowned him out. Fraud. Thief. Poor Talia. Words sharper than any blade. I stepped off the stage, folder still in my hand, closing the distance between us. My boots thudded against the old linoleum, each step echoing louder than his shallow breathing. "You wanted public?" I said, my voice calm but cutting. "You wanted everyone to see me as weak? Take a good look, Sterling. Because the only thing people see right now is you, stripped down to the con you are." His smile snapped into a snarl. "You think this little performance buries me? You don't understand. Old man, I own the story. And I'll spin this, just like I always do." That's when Harris stepped forward again, voice carrying like a gavel. "Not tonight, you won't. We've got sworn statements, financial trails, and half this town willing to testify. You'll spin yourself right into a corner." The crowd erupted, cheers, curses, shouts for justice. Sterling raised his hands like a preacher calling for calm, but nobody was listening anymore. For once, his words didn't land. And then came the third strike. From the back of the hall, a frail woman stood, leaning on a cane. Her voice wavered, but it cut through the noise like a nail gun. "That's him. He stole from me. Promised me safety after my husband passed. Left me with nothing but debts." Gasps swept the room. Sterling's face drained, his composure cracking like drywall under a boot. He sputtered, "She's confused." But 2 more voices rose, an older couple near the front. "He took our savings. Said he was investing. We lost everything." The crowd surged with anger. Sterling backed toward the door, hands up, mask on. His perfect suit looked like a costume now, cheap fabric stretched over rot. I followed him step for step, my voice steady. You said I'd regret this. But regret's a luxury reserved for men who ever had integrity. All you've got is exposure. And exposure rots faster than wood in the rain. Harris nodded to his officers, who closed in from both sides. Sterling shoved past a chair, his panic naked now. But before they could cuff him, he turned, looked straight at me, and spat his venom. You may win this round, old man, but your daughter will never forgive you for choosing shame over silence. I'll make sure of it. The officers grabbed him, dragging him toward the exit. The hall erupted in cheers, anger, relief, a chorus of voices reclaiming their dignity. And in the middle of that storm, I stood tall, tape measure still hooked on my belt like a badge. Sterling had been humiliated again, stripped of the stage, his followers turning against him. But as he was hauled outside, his eyes locked on mine, promising something darker. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was a setup for his most dangerous play yet. The night after the VFW Hall showdown, my house felt different. Quieter, but not safe. The kind of quiet man hears before a storm rolls in from the plains. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder of evidence spread before me, the tape measure in my hand. Snapping it open and shut, the sound sharp as a gun cocking. Sterling had been dragged out humiliated, publicly unmasked, yet his last words haunted me. Your daughter will never forgive you. He wasn't just fighting for freedom. He was fighting for her loyalty, her heart. That was his last stronghold. The phone buzzed. Talia. For a moment, my chest eased. I picked up, steady, sweetheart. Her voice trembled. Dad, Sterling says you set him up, that the police are in your pocket. He swears you planted evidence. I closed my eyes, swallowing the anger. Do you believe that? Silence stretched. Then, softly, I don't know what to believe anymore. My throat tightened. Talia, listen to me. I raise you to know a man by his work, not his words. What's Sterling built? What's he left standing? She didn't answer. The line clicked dead. I sat there a long while, staring at the handkerchief folded beside the folder. My wife's lace edges frayed, like everything I loved had been worn thin. I whispered to her memory. He's trying to turn her against me. I won't let him. The next morning, I found proof of his reach. Spray painted across my garage door in red. Thief. Neighbors stood on sidewalks, whispering. Someone filmed it on their phone. Sterling was pulling strings from the shadows, feeding the lie he crafted. I scrubbed the paint until my arms shook, but the stain lingered, faint but present. A scar. That's what Sterling wanted. Scars on my name, my home, my bond with Talia. But scars tell stories too, and mine would speak louder. That afternoon, Harris called. Matt, you need to know. Sterling made bail. He's out again. I gripped the phone, the words hitting harder than a hammer to the thumb. Already? After last night? Money changes speed, Harris said grimly. But don't think humiliation doesn't leave a mark. He'll come at you harder now. Be ready. I hung up, staring out the window at the skeletal branches swaying in the Oklahoma wind. Be ready. I walked to the garage, pulled out my old toolbox. Worn wrenches, rusted pliers, the tools of a man who fixes things when they break. I laid them out, one by one, the way a soldier might lay out his weapons. Because this fight wasn't just about reputation anymore. It was about reclaiming my daughter's trust, about proving to her, to the town, to myself, that a man who builds doesn't bow to a man who destroys. As I set the tape measure on top of the pile, I whispered, time to measure twice, cut once. That night, I heard footsteps crunch across my yard. A shadow slid past a window, pausing long enough for me to feel it stare. Sterling wasn't hiding anymore. He was circling. And the next time we met, it wouldn't be in whispers or rumors. It would be face to face. The footsteps outside didn't fade. They lingered, pacing slow along the gravel path like a man taking inventory of what wasn't his. I sat in the dark, back straight in my chair, the tape measure cold and heavy in my palm. My heart didn't race. At 69, you learn that panic wastes oxygen. Instead, I listened, the crunch, the pause, the crunch again. Sterling was testing me, letting me know he could walk my perimeter whenever he pleased. Finally, the sound stopped. A car door clicked. Engine growled. Tires hissed against asphalt. Then silence. The next morning, the proof lay waiting. A single white envelope tucked beneath my doormat. My name scrawled on the front. Sharp strokes digging into the paper. Inside was a photo, grainy black and white, but unmistakable. Talia, sitting in a cafe, Sterling's arm draped over her shoulders. Her smile looked forced, eyes downcast, but the message was clear. She's still mine. My gut tightened, but rage didn't blind me. It focused me. He wanted me off balance. He wanted me desperate. Instead, I called Harris. Evidence bag. I told him. You'll find it under my mat. He's escalating. Careful, Matt, Harris warned. Guys like him, they don't just bluff. They escalate until someone breaks. I know, I said. That's why I won't break first. That afternoon, I drove to the lumberyard. I hadn't been there in years, but the smell of sawdust hit like an Oldham. I bought planks, screws, a new lock set. If Sterling wanted a war, he'd find out quick that builders don't just patch holes. We fortify. Back home, I reinforced doors, braced windows, even rigged a few makeshift alarms with cans and wire, old tricks from job sites where theft was common. Every clang of hammer against nail steadied me. Every turn of the screw felt like reclaiming ground. But as night fell, another sound cut through the quiet. A crash, glass shattering. I bolted to the back of the house. The porch window was smashed, glass glittering like ice across the floor. And there, half in the frame, stood Sterling. His grin stretched wide. Evening, old man. Thought I'd drop by. I didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't need to. I stepped closer, voice steady. Breaking and entering? Bold move for a man already out on bail. He climbed through the frame, dusting glass from his sleeve, swagger intact. Police can't protect you forever. And Talia? She's with me. She'll never forgive you for dragging me through the mud. I stood tall, tape measure hooked to my belt, the same weight I'd been on every job site I ever led. Funny thing about mud, Sterling, it dries, cracks, falls away. But you're rot, and rot never leaves. He sneered, stepping closer. You can't stop me. You're just a relic with tools. I leaned in, my voice low enough to cut. Tools build. Relics endure. And you'll be dust before I'm done. His eyes flickered, anger sparking. He raised a fist, and at that moment, headlights swept across the yard. A cruiser pulled up, red and blue flashing through the broken window. Sterling froze, caught mid-motion. And for the second time, I watched him choke on the trap he thought he set for me. The red and blue strobes washed over the shattered glass, turning Sterling's smirk into something grotesque, half shadow, half panic. The officer spilled out of the cruiser, boots pounding the frozen ground. Detective Harris led the way, flashlight beam cutting across the yard like a saw blade. Hands where I can see them. Harris barked. Sterling straightened, palms raised halfway, but his voice was slick as ever. This is what it looks like. I came to talk, to reconcile. The old man panicked and smashed his own window to frame me. I let out a bitter laugh. You break into my house, threaten me, and now you're the peacemaker? That's one hell of a sales pitch. The officers cuffed him, glass crunching under their boots. Sterling twisted toward Talia, who had just stepped out of the cruiser's back seat. My chest clenched. Harris must have called her. Thinking it was time she saw the truth. Sterling's eyes locked on her, his words venom wrapped in honey. Baby, listen to me. He staged this. He wants you to hate me. He's destroying us. Talia froze in the yard, her face pale in the cruiser lights. Her gaze darted from me to him, confusion tearing her apart. I stepped forward, my voice carrying steady and sure. Sweetheart, you've known my hand your whole life. These hands built your swing set, fixed your first car, held you when you cried for your mama. They don't stage lies. They build truth. Look around. Who's in cuffs? Who broke glass to get inside a home that isn't his? Her lip trembled. For a heartbeat, I saw her doubt waver. But Sterling lunged, straining against the cuffs, shouting, "He's lying. He's been lying since the day we met." The officers shoved him into the cruiser, but his words clung to the cold air like smoke. Talia's eyes brimmed, torn between two men, one who raised her, one who had seduced her. Harris touched her shoulder gently. "Miss, your father's telling you the truth. Sterling's rap sheet could rap this whole building. You need to decide who you trust." She whispered, I just don't know." That cut deeper than glass. As the cruiser pulled away with Sterling inside, I stood under the cold February sky, my breath fogging the light. I'd humiliated him twice, torn his mask in front of neighbors, and now before my daughter. But scars like his don't heal, they fester. Harris turned to me. "He's slipping, Matt. We got him on braking, and entering now. The DA's building the case stronger by the hour." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on Talia. She wouldn't look at me. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, the folder open again, the handkerchief beside it. I whispered to the empty room, "How many times do I have to rip the mask off before she sees the face underneath?" Outside, the wind rattled the busted window, the boards I'd nailed trembling against the frame. And in the back of my mind, I knew Sterling wasn't beaten. He was cornered, and a cornered man doesn't retreat. He goes for the jugular. The days after Sterling's second arrest crawled by like winter shadows, long, sharp, and heavy. Harris told me the DA was stacking charges: fraud, identity theft, now breaking and entering. On paper, it looked airtight. But men like Sterling don't live on paper. They live in whispers, in doubt, in the cracks of loyalty. And my daughter was still cracked. One evening, I found her on the porch, bundled in her coat, staring out at the empty street. The boards I'd nailed over the broken window groaned in the wind. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "He called me from jail," she said, her voice small. I felt the words hit like a hammer to the chest. "What did he say?" "That you're setting him up. That you've hated him from the start. That maybe you'd rather see me alone than happy." Her words weren't her own. They were his, dripping from her lips like venom he'd planted. My fist clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "Talia, happiness isn't built on lies. You think your mama would want this for you? A man who steals, manipulates, breaks into homes?" She turned, tears streaking down her face. "I don't know what mama would want. She's not here. It's just you and him, and both of you pulling me apart." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the handkerchief. I placed it in her hand, the lace edges frayed from years of use. "She is here. Every time you choose truth over lies, strength over weakness, she's with you. Don't let him steal that, too." Talia's shoulders shook, but she didn't pull away. Not yet. The next morning, Harris called again. His tone was grim. "Matt, you need to sit down. Sterling's lawyer's playing dirty. They're trying to paint you as unstable, angry old widower, jealous of his daughter's new life. They've even filed motions claiming you provoked him." I closed my eyes, the bitterness rising like bile. "So now I'm the villain." "That's his play," Harris said. "If he can't win clean, he'll smear you until no one knows who to believe." That afternoon, I drove past the courthouse and saw it myself. A reporter stood on the steps, microphone in hand, Sterling's lawyer at his side. Words like family feud and abusive father carried across the parking lot. Cameras clicked. The story was twisting. I clenched the steering wheel, heat burning in my chest. He wasn't just trying to destroy me. He was using me as the scapegoat to shield himself. That night, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. His voice, smug even behind bars. "You can nail boards on windows, old man, but you can't board up a reputation. By the time I'm done, Talia will spit at the sound of your name. She'll come crawling back to me. You'll die alone." I replayed it twice, each word carving deeper. Then I stood, grabbed my tape measure, snapped it open with a metallic crack. "Enough?" I whispered. "You want a final showdown? You'll get it." Because humiliation wasn't enough anymore. The next step had to end him completely. And it was coming. February 14th, Valentine's Day. The air was sharp as cut glass, the kind that makes your breath sting when you step outside. A fitting day for love to be tested and lies to be broken. The courthouse was packed. Reporters clustered on the steps, microphones buzzing like flies. Inside, the benches overflowed with neighbors, faces I had known for decades. Some came for justice. Some came for spectacle. All of them carried whispers. I sat at the front, folder of evidence on my lap, the tape measure clipped to my belt. Across the aisle, Sterling walked in wearing a tailored suit, wrists free, grin polished. He winked at the cameras, blowing a kiss to no one in particular. Even in chains of rumor, he strutted like he owned the room. But today wasn't his stage. It was mine. The bailiff called order. Sterling's lawyer rose first, spewing the same poison: angry widower, jealous father, fabrications meant to make me look senile. Every word aimed not at the judge, but at Talia, seated in the second row. I could feel her trembling even without looking. When my turn came, I stood. My knees ached, but my voice didn't waver. Your Honor, I built homes in the city for 40 years. Folks here have walked under roofs I framed, leaned against walls I braced. I know the way to trust, because every nail I drove was a promise it wouldn't collapse. My daughter, my only child, deserved that same promise. Sterling broke it before it was even finished. I laid the evidence on the stand. The fake marriages, the bank records, the taped voicemail where his threats hissed like snakes. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge's brow furrowed deeper with every page. Then Harris called his final witness, an elderly woman, cane tapping against the floor, the same one who had spoken in the VFW hall. Her voice wavered but struck hard. That man stole my savings, promised safety, left me with nothing. He's no husband. He's a thief. The courtroom erupted. Sterling's mask cracked, fury flashing raw. He slammed a fist on the table, shouting, "Lies! All of it. I'm the victim here." The judge's gavel thundered, silencing him. Enough. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Matthias, you've spoken as a father. But what does your daughter believe?" All eyes shifted to Talia. My heart clenched as she rose, slow, uncertain. She looked at Sterling, then at me. Her face was pale, but her eyes, finally, were clear. "My father's not perfect," she said, voice shaking but strong. "But he's never lied to me. Sterling has. Again and again. I was blind, but I see it now. He didn't just try to steal our home. He tried to steal my father's honor. And I won't let him." Gasps rippled through the room. Sterling went white, his smirk collapsing. I closed my eyes, a weight lifting from my chest that had been there for months. But Sterling wasn't done. He leapt to his feet, shouting at the judge, at me, at Talia, words jagged and incoherent. Officers rushed to restrain him, dragging him back as he cursed, spit flying. The courtroom roared, cameras flashing, voices rising. Sterling was no longer the charming con man. He was exposed, wild, pathetic, humiliated in front of everyone. And as they pinned him in chains, his eyes found mine, full of hate and fear. This was a final crack. The only thing left was to break him completely. The gavel struck like a nail driven home. The judge's voice rang clear, no hesitation, no mercy. "Sterling Wright, you are hereby sentenced to 11 years in state prison for fraud, identity theft, and aggravated burglary." The words rolled across the courtroom like thunder over plains. Sterling's jaw slackened, his polished grin finally gone. For the first time since he slithered into our lives, he had nothing to sell, no mask to hide behind. Talia gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks, not confusion this time, but of release. She turned to me, her voice breaking. "Dad, I'm so sorry." And when she folded into my arms, I felt the years of distance, the months of doubt, all fall away. The handkerchief I kept tucked in my pocket was caught between us, her fingers brushing the lace edges her mama once sewed. It was as if her mother herself was holding us together. Sterling thrashed as officers hauled him toward the door, his voice cracking with desperation. "You think you've won? You're nothing. Oh, man. She'll remember me. She'll. But the chains bit tighter, his words swallowed by the echo of boots on tile. The crowd in the gallery, neighbors, victims, strangers who'd seen through his lies, rose to their feet. Some clapped, some shouted curses, some simply nodded at me, not in pity, but in respect. The humiliation was complete. The slick suit couldn't save him. The charm was ashes. Sterling left that courtroom not as a man of influence, but as a fraud, disgraced, forgotten by all except the guards dragging him away. Outside, the February skies stretched wide and blue, the Oklahoma wind cutting sharp. Talia and I walked down the courthouse steps together. She slipped her hand into mine, like she used to as a child when she thought the world was too big. "I see it now," she whispered. "Everything you warned me about. He almost took me from you." I shook my head. "No, he couldn't, because you were never his to take." She pressed her forehead to mine, and for the first time since her wedding day, I felt peace. Later that evening, I sat on the porch, the house groaning in the wind, boards holding steady just like me. The tape measure lay on the table, extended halfway, the metal tongue catching the last light of sunset. I thought about all the years of building, of mending, of keeping promises. I thought about Sterling's smirk, now broken, and I thought about the words I carried through this fight. Measure twice, trust once. I folded the tape shut with a snap, the sound final, sharp. Behind me, Talia stepped onto the porch, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She set one beside me, her eyes soft. "Happy Valentine's Day, Dad." I looked at her, at the house, at the sky turning gold. The storm had passed. The rot was cut out, and for the first time in a long while, the frame of my life felt square again. Sterling had tried to steal everything, but in the end, he'd only built the scaffold for his own fall. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady, and it was mine. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.